Hello YouTube, this is Stick 152. So today I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of my latest Unity asset, the Radiation Zone Toolbox. I'm going to go through the demo scene here. I've got another video that goes into how to actually create and use some of these components, but this is mainly going to just be a walkthrough of the demo scene. So let's jump right in. Okay, so a couple things to notice is first thing you're going to see is the Geiger counter and a dosimeter badge. So this Geiger counter, it has an emissive screen. It has power functionality. You can turn it off and turn it back on. You can set the color of that emissive screen. I'll show you that in just a second. You can switch between the dosage units, so the display units, so microsieverts, millisieverts, rads, alpha, beta, gamma, neutron, then REMs, millirems, microrems, also grays, alpha, beta, gamma, neutron, and then sieverts, millisieverts. So as you can see in the level, I've got a 0.2 microsievert background radiation, and that's from the isolation zones, and I'll show you that in just a second. But we're going to walk down here. So you can see as we go through here, go around this corner and detect some radioactive barrels. You can see the fall off of radiation as you get away from it. Also, as you progress down this hallway, it falls off and slowly ramps up as you get closer. I'm going to come over here into this room. Now we've got two zones in here, one that's surrounding these barrels and one that's dealing with this puddle here. So as you can see, my health isn't going down, and that's because I've got my virtual radiation suit on. There's a flag that gives you a protection factor. In this case, I've got it set to 2,000 millisieverts. And I'm only getting 200 millisieverts right now. So my dosimeter badge is also protected because I'm wearing it inside my radiation suit. So I don't see any radiation on there. Plus, with the dosimeter too, because of the scale, it's set right now to go up to 10,000 millisieverts. So the amount of change that you see from a couple of hundred millisieverts is so minute that you can't really see it. It's hard to perceive with the eye until it gets up around like 12 to 1500 millisieverts. Okay, so I want to show you something special about that puddle too. So let's pause it here. So on the player object, on this radiation receiver, there's this flag here, this radiation protection enabled. So this is going to be related to like a radiation suit. Excuse me. So if your player got a radiation suit, you can set this flag to true. Now this protection factor, you can scale this. So if they have a really poor quality suit, maybe it only protects up to a couple of hundred, 300, 400 millisieverts. If they've got a really, boffo suit, it's awesome. Maybe it protects up to 2,000. You can also use this value to deal with damage. Say they rip a hole in the radiation suit. Well, maybe you want to drop this down to only a couple of hundred, or maybe 50. Maybe they destroy the suit altogether, or they don't have it on, and you can just toggle this off. Okay, so we're going to turn that off real quickly, and I'm going to go back in here. Now, so you can see that I'm going to start taking damage as I get over here. It takes a little bit because we have our the health calculation. Right now we have a pause it here, show you another thing. So we have this radiation effect scaler. Well, that changes the speed at which the amount that changes, the way that it affects our health. And we also have a really high cumulative dose. So between those two, it just takes the health bar a long time to change at that small of a dosage of radiation. But you can see that it is changing. Now I want you to watch really carefully. Now if I step into this puddle, and I step out and I walk back in here, now if you watch carefully, my health is still diminishing, or depleting, sorry. And that is because this puddle has a special flag. It has this clings to objects. So when that's true, you have a time that it clings and the max dosage amount that it affects you by. So things like that where you have a puddle or something like that clings to the player object, and that tells the radiation receiver, hey, something is still on me and it's affecting me by a certain amount. If you're wearing a radiation suit or if you have a protection factor, that factors that in so you're protected from that up to a certain level. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, so we're going to continue to get affected by radiation here. Okay, so let's go down to this other room. Now this has two zones in it, one for each of these. Now just because of the nature of the way that the triggers work and the nature of the beast here, what I'm doing is I decided to do an additive approach. So each of these has a set amount of radiation. And you'll notice it kind of goes up as I get in between them. So when I'm in between both of them, what it's doing is it's taking the dosage where I'm standing in relation to that pile. It gives that value. And then the dosage from where I'm standing to that stack of barrels, it takes that value. And then it adds the two together. So you get a basic additive approach to the radiation. That may not be 100% realistic, but in this case, that's the way I did it. And you know, everything is open source. You get the source code for everything when you buy this asset. So if you don't like doing that, or if you want to change anything, feel free. Go right ahead. Okay, so now we're going to be exiting, and outside of here, everything is really nasty. So everything is highly radioactive out of here. So as we progress down this hall, if you watch the Geiger counter, you're going to see that the dosage amount is going to start increasing, start ramping up. Now, if you watch the dosimeter, you can see that it's matching up fairly well with the dose that I'm getting there. And as I start moving out, it's going to darken out until finally I've gotten my 10,000 millisieverts. So I've received my maximum dosage on that. Now that's fatal to an extent. So it'll eventually kill me. Here. Okay, and I get my little down here. I got my little message: "Arg, I'm dead." So essentially, you know, there is a fatal dose, so you get a certain amount. I'm not constantly hammering that, so just for playability's sake for the game, if you leave that area, I have it really designed for more of a game thing. It's not a 100% realistic simulation, so if you leave and then you come back in that outer zone, it quits applying it to you. So you're not like, in real life, if you got exposed to that kind of radiation, you're going to be sick and you're probably going to die from it. But in a game, that doesn't always make for great gameplay. You can change that, though. It's fairly easy to change that in the code and make that, keep applying it and make it kill you. Okay, so the other video actually really goes into detail on these the different components, the different zones. So I won't go into that too in depth here. So you have like the rect and the rect ramp and the sphere. I'll go over them really quickly, just kind of show you what they look like and how they're applied. There is one that's really best illustrated here, and I talk about it in my other video, but this one you actually get to see it applied in real life. Now it's pertaining to this datum here. So let's turn off those labels. That is a feature I added here. You can hit L and it'll toggle the labels, and for moving the inner zone, if you press W, it switches between a free move and the axis move, or the position tool. Okay, so back to this datum. Now this datum is set, the axis that it's on is set by this zone axis datum value here. So inside of here you can set which axis it's on. That's a unitized distance along that axis, so that changes based on, you know, the length of that axis, whether you're side to side or corner to corner, these corner to the bottom corner, that, you know, wherever you are. And then the dosage beyond the datum, in this case I have it set to 0, so I'll only be getting the background radiation from the isolation zones. I'll only be getting the background radiation until I pass this datum. Anything beyond this datum just gets the value, you know, it only processes what you tell it to process beyond it. Anything on this side, denoted by this red dashed line, anything on this side of that datum gets the value here inside the red box, so it actually processes relative to where you are. So as you walk around through this box, as the player enters this box, it's going to see, okay, I've hit this trigger, but I'm on this side of the datum, so I just only have to apply what I have here in the dosage beyond datum. But as I come on this side of the datum, it says, now I have to process where where that object is in relation to this hot zone. So it takes where you are, it takes casts a line from where you are to the edge, outside edge of this box, or to the closest edge. And then from there, it takes a position backwards to the nearest edge over here, and then it figures out the change, so the delta. And that much distance to go from 0 to the maximum amount, how much does it have to change in that distance? And then where you are, it figures out, okay, that you're that many units in, so your radiation amount is this value. So, and that's effective all the way around, 360 degrees. It calculates that, as long as you're on the hot side of the datum. Okay, so now in this one, the reason I have it that way is I don't want radiation coming out here through this concrete wall. I only want the Geiger counter to pick it up, or you to be exposed to it as you're in line of sight. So as you can see, when you move down the hall right in here, you're line of sight of that, and it's, it's kind of casting out in this direction. So anything in this area you're going to get alert amount of radiation. Let's take a look at one of the other zones. So we have the ones over on the pond and then are surrounding these barrels. Okay. Let's see. So in this one here, you can see we've got the hot zone surrounding these barrels. And so what's happening is what, like I described, when you walk in, as soon as you penetrate this, it detects that a radiation receiver or a Geiger counter or a dosimeter has entered this zone. And then what it's doing is this radiation zone, it calculates what the value is, and then it invokes an event on the dosimeter or the Geiger counter or the radiation receiver. It invokes this event and tells it, hey, you've received this radiation from this zone. So each zone has its own GUID, and it creates a packet. And there's 3 types, packet types. So there's or trigger types. So one is an enter, one is an exit, and one is a stay. And each one is processed differently. Each of these objects, so each Geiger counter, it maintains a list of active radiation zones. So if you had multiple zones nested within each other, like you do in this case, in this room, you have one there, and then you have one on the pond here. So if you have the case, and you also have these isolation zones, which I'll go into in just a second. So essentially, each object maintains a list of the active zones that it's in. And it's also inside of a background zone, but I digress. So, and in that list, as it goes through there, every fixed update, it processes what the radiation values are for each of the zones that it's in. It adds them all together, and then that's what affects you. For the Geiger counter, that's how it reads it. It just essentially, if you're in multiple nested zones, then it adds those values together, and that's what it reads. And for the radiation receiver, that would be on an NPC or a player, and it adds all those values together, and that's the value you get. With the pond, let's see, with this pond zone, I've got this datum all the way to the top, because I want to make sure, when the datum is set to 1, then that means as soon as you enter this, you're processing the full amount. The inner zone is the same size as the outer zone, or within its overlap. So as soon as you step in, you get the maximum amount of radiation value for this. And of course, like that one's got the cling to objects. Just so you know, all of these are customizable colors. So you can make these, excuse me, whatever you want, anywhere on the spectrum. And just however you want to do it. And everything is undo, redo compliant. So if you move one of these things or resize it, you can undo and redo. Let's see, a couple other things. Like I said, you can get rid of the labels. You can hit W to toggle the move type, and then just kind of move this guy all around. I do constrain these within the boundaries. So as you try to move this zone, it won't let you move it out of it. And if you try to scale it, an inner zone won't scale bigger than an outer zone, and vice versa. Okay. And then of course, the datum can be moved around from there, or it can be moved around from this datum distance here. Okay, let's take a look at the other two. Now this is an example of the overlapping zones all in one room. So in this case, clean this up a little bit here. In this ovoid room, so you have 2 spherical zones, and the only thing that's different between them is their inner zone. So that's where you get the additive. So each one of these has this max rads per hour, and in this case they're both the same. And then it just takes these and figures out where the players or the object's distance from each one of these is in that packet of data that the object processes, and then it just adds it all together. So there are a couple of special cases here, and we'll go over those real quickly. And the special cases are the isolation zones. So each isolation zone, you can see I use these to outline or to encompass the bunker. So the isolation zones allow you to ignore the background zone. And so anytime you're in an isolation zone, it keeps a list of which ones you're in. You can be in multiple isolation zones, and it adds them together, so it averages them. So that basically lets you set an average background radiation for anything in this protected envelope here. In this case, it's 0.002 millisieverts, which is 0.2 microsieverts, which is I think it's 0.24 is like an average, worldwide average, but it varies from location to location. Just in the interest of my own personal feelings, I put it at 0.2 microsieverts. So, but anyway, so these are encompassing the level. Then the background zone, I've got it surrounding this. Now the reason I do this is because, like in this case, you can see of the background zone, its background dosage amount is 10,000 millisieverts, and so is its radiation on exit. So the background zone is a special use zone. There should only ever be one. You can have more than one, but it won't process more than one. And that's where the IDs come in handy. Because if you exit, like if you had two, like say there was this zone and then there was another on the outside, if you exit this zone, it clears the list of radiation zones and then only lets it have one. So it deletes, basically it empties the list and then adds itself back in. And then anytime you, like if you exited the next background zone, it wouldn't matter. It would just say, no, I've already exited one before, I don't care. It ignores every other zone that would be outside of there. Because it's really designed to be used as the border for a map. So anytime you exit that, it ignores everything from that point onward. So when you come back in, like the one, like if you had to, if there was one on the outside, you came back in the outer one, it's still going to ignore it because the IDs don't match. It says you exited or you entered a background zone, but the ID doesn't match, so I'm ignoring you. And so it only will start processing other zones when you re-enter the background zone that it knew about, that you exited the first time. So once that ID matches, then you're good to go. So, and these packets, those IDs also help update the packet in the list. So instead of deleting an item from the list and re-adding it or anything like that, what it does is it just does a really quick link search for that item in the list based on the ID. And it says, hey, does this ID exist? Great. Okay, then change these values. If the ID doesn't exist, say you teleport it in and you got it on trigger stay and it hadn't already been added to the list, it will add it for you if it didn't already exist. And so then the Geiger counter or the dosimeter or whatever will start processing that in its fixed update. Okay, so the last special one is the ramp zone. And this is designed specifically for cases like this, where you have a hallway or some type of a constrained area that is leading up to like a high radioactive zone. And essentially what you do is you set the dosage beyond the datum. In this case, it should match with the background zone in this particular case. So anything past this datum gets this max value. Anything this side of it, wherever you are inside this zone, inside this trigger, it calculates the distance from where you are to this datum, and then based on the length of this axis, the distance of the datum along this axis, it figures out what the fall off should be, and then figures out based on that fall off and that delta from where you're standing, you should have this amount of radiation, and then that's what it applies. But once you pass that, all bets are off. You just get the maximum dosage. And that's it. And it's, this one only consists of that. It doesn't allow you to select between background or isolation or anything like that. It's a specialized case, and that's all it's good for. Okay, so like I said, the other video has a little more information on how to use all these and how to create everything from scratch. If you have any questions or comments, please put them down in the comment section, and I'll link to my, I should be able to put a link in my forum as well, and once this is actually posted on the asset store, I'll come back and add a link to it there. Anyway, thanks for your time, and I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.